Let's have some better news for you. Well, surprising news today. Good news. Today's growth figures for the last 3 months, the June quarter, the economy did not go backwards, as many tipped, actually grew by 0.7%. And growth for the year, very healthy 9.6%. But of course, that's after the clobbering that we got from the national lockdown. Joining me is Judith Sloan, economist, company director, former productivity commissioner. I won't go through all the many positions of great authority she's had, but she's now a columnist with the Australian newspaper as well. Judith Sloan, thank you for your time. Look, the figures are better than expected. We're not going into recession just yet. Why?
Well, Andrew, GDP figures are extremely backward-looking, and they're backward-looking for two reasons. This relates to the June quarter, which is well and truly over. So it takes basically 6 weeks for the Australian Bureau of Statistics to conclude what the figure is. And therefore, it's almost economic history, and it's particularly economic history in the context of what's been happening since that time. In the June quarter, there was a little bit of lockdown. I think they're talking about 17 days, just bits of the population. So not much affected. So really, what's going to be, I think, a dire outcome will be the September quarter.
Well, thank you very much. I was wondering why there were no party poppers on the shelf behind you, but there you go. Now you've explained it. Judith, can I go to something that you've been writing about lately? We have seen companies like Qantas and SBC saying that they want their workers vaccinated, no jab, no job. A lot of employers are looking at that too. The New South Wales Premier is saying, look, she fully supports things like that. But you can't ignore the fact that quite a few Australians do not want to be told what to put in their bodies. There's, whether they're anti-vaxxers or whatever, they don't like anyone making them do that. Do you think businesses are going to actually be able to demand this?
Look, I think the piece I wrote probably concluded along the lines that from a legal point of view, this is clear as mud. And my feeling that with the exception of some particular settings, perhaps like aged care and healthcare, it's probably quite a stretch to think employers will be able to impose mandatory vaccinations on their staff. Now, okay, here's the gossip on Qantas. I mean, they had done an internal survey and asked their staff, and their staff were sort of 90% were in favour of mandatory vaccination. I think partly on the basis that people think they're protected because their neighbours are vaccinated. I think what we now know about the vaccination effects, that's not actually true, but there we go. So I guess they're kind of working on the basis that this is just going with staff preferences. And maybe with the airlines or some airline workers, it perhaps is reasonable. But, there are probably more people who want to work in the airline industry or aviation, and therefore they don't have, worker shortages. There are plenty of other areas, and this is happening in America, where employers are very scared to mandate vaccines because they just think people will quit.
Well, I think that we're going to have a big debate about that because I saw the ACTU is not in favour of forcing workers to do this, and nor is the Business Council, which is weird because, as you're right, Alan Joyce is on their board.
Yeah, that was very strange. I didn't really understand the point of that joint statement. I mean, it may be that the unions see this as a potential lever. And I mean, I don't mind. I think, an employer would be very sensible to give people some, paid leave to get a vaccination and perhaps if they have sort of an adverse reaction to give them some more paid leave. I know in America it's quite common for the vaccinations to actually be available on the work site. So that makes sense too. But I think, and Andrew, you're going to have to watch this issue. I guess, my libertarian heart still beats there. And, my feeling is that mandatory vaccines is going to be a bridge too far in quite a lot of cases.
Oh, I think so. I think it's got to be really carefully targeted, to be quite specific, to meet a particular threat to the business and to the health of the workers, or maybe to attract staff. But, people outside, gardeners, whatever, landscape gardeners, I think it'd be very wrong. Judith Sloan, thank you so much for your time.